Welcome to the Bookers Alliance podcast, where we hold the pencil and the pencil is power. Coming at you right now is your host, Marky Mark, along with the man, the myth, the legend, Frank Donaldson. Join us as we discuss the ever-changing landscape of professional wrestling. So hang on tight, you jabronis, and enjoy the ride. Hey, welcome in, everybody. Thank you for joining today's episode of the Bookers Alliance podcast. Pull yourself up a ringside seat so y'all can hear me layeth the smacketh down on my co-host and our rivals picks that we're going to talk about today, Frank.
Oh my goodness, here we go. It's going to be one of those episodes, huh?
Yeah.
Everybody fold up your ringside seat and get ready to crack it over somebody's head right now, because it sounds like we're about to be going at it in here today.
We're going to lay it down. So we're going to talk about rivalries. We've kind of broke them up into different eras. Again, these aren't, if you want to put them in a top five, whatever you want to do with it, that's your business. But here at the Bookers Alliance, we got the pencil. We can do and write whatever we want to write. So we're going to talk about the different rivals that have made impressions on us through the eras as pro wrestling fans. So what better way to kick this off than one of the biggest rivalries of the Attitude Era? And for this, we're talking about Vincent Kennedy McMahon and then the one, the only, Mr. Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass.
Ooh, and them are fighting words right there.
Did you just play the Austin part, not the Vince McMahon part? Well, you know what that means? You're fired.
Oh, don't fire me yet. We got a podcast to do, man. Come on.
Hell, yeah, damn, our audience left. Oh, hell, I don't have no co-producer. All right, you're rehired.
Oh, thank you, Vince. I appreciate that.
All right.
So, yeah, with that, we're going to, I'm going to take Stone Cold Steve Austin in this rivalry, and my co-host here, he's going to take old Vincent Kennedy McMahon there.
If you didn't already, if you couldn't tell by our actions already here, we're going to pick sides. We're going to play out the rivalry here as though we were in those people's positions at the time. So we're going to have a little bit of fun today.
So with Stone Cold Steve Austin, Stone Cold was the blue-collar man, the beer drinker. He was the raising hell, kicking ass. That was Stone Cold, and he wanted to buck the authority. He wanted to buck the system. And what better way to do that than go after the CEO, Vince McMahon?
Well, Vince was the boss. Vince was, at this point in time, he was an on-screen character as the boss. Up until then, he was just an announcer. He was just a guy. You didn't know he had a behind-the-scenes role. But as we came to find out, especially in the Attitude Era, Vince was the boss. He was the one pulling the strings. He was Geppetto to Pinocchio's puppet. He was the man. So if you're gonna feud with somebody, you want to feud with the biggest heel in wrestling, and that's gonna be the owner, the rich billionaire owner, Vincent Kennedy McMahon.
Kennedy. Oh, not wrong. The wrong Kennedy. Right?
Wrong Kennedy.
Wrong
right
Kennedy.
String, wrong yo-yo. All right, the first pop of the day. Yes,
I'm going to use that somewhere. Right string, wrong yo-yo.
Oh, hell, I use that often. So you've heard it before from me and probably just didn't recognize it.
I like that. I'm going to use that somewhere.
There you go.
So, yeah, with this one, these two guys went back and forth. And they were just excitement, and they were the gasoline to somebody's match. I mean, they were just pouring it on, and the fans just ate every bit of it up. But as a fan, who wouldn't want to see somebody kick their boss's ass?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, then you got Vince McMahon on the other side. He's the boss. He's out there running everything, and everybody bow down to Vince McMahon, and he's got the Kiss My Ass Club and all the different, things he's done over his career. But then he's got this guy down here, this young upstart, bald-headed, trash-talking dude, and he's going to buck authority. Well, Vince McMahon's not going to let him buck authority. He's going to shut that down right nifty and proper, but just wasn't as easy to shut down a Stone Cold Steve Austin as it is to shut down a Daniel Pewter, guys like that who came in, had a cup of coffee, and got the hell out.
Yeah, I would dare say Austin had some good one-ups when it comes to what he did to Vince, whether it was filling his Corvette full of concrete.
Ah, nice. That was classic.
Or driving the beer truck down to the ring and spraying him with beer.
There you go. Getting the whole corporation took a beer bath that night.
Or damn hunting him like a deer and putting him in a net and holding a gun to his head.
That was definitely a good one. Best one I could think of, though, is the hospital scene.
The hospital scene.
Out of anything out of that rivalry, and that came away from being memorable, I think that was the most memorable moment of that rivalry was hearing that bedpan crack upside Vince's head. And then you heard that bong, and then Vince fell over, literally ass out. I mean, pure hilarity ensued in that, but throughout all the funny parts of it, throughout all the comedy, I mean, you really felt that intense rivalry in between those two guys. It was just amazing television.
Yeah, and the back and forth between the two, you saw the admiration at the end of the day, though, when they did the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
When Vince inducted him into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
I mean,
because up to that point, Vince hadn't inducted anybody.
No.
I mean, Vince makes a point to not be shown on TV.
he don't want to be mentioned. He don't want anything.
I mean, he didn't even induct Hulk Hogan. They brought in Sylvester Stallone to induct Hulk Hogan. Vince had never made a spectacle of himself because he didn't want anybody to think about him. He wanted them to focus on the talent. But yeah, Austin was the first one to get Vince from behind the curtain to come back out and do that. And then, of course, Undertaker had it later on in life. But yeah, up to that point, Vince had only did that for Austin. But I mean, Vince literally put it all on the line, his body, his company, his everything to make Austin a star. And I mean, he did it. He made him a star, probably the most memorable star during the Attitude Era, far and away.
Yeah, and that's one of the keys. You can't think about the Attitude Era without thinking about Austin and Vince McMahon.
No, absolutely not.
So we'll segue on and move on to the next era, and we're going to call this one the Hogan Era.
The Hogan Era.
So what you gonna do when Hulk Hogan runs wild on you, brother?
So Mr. 24-inch Pythons, and we are going to talk about the rivalry he had with the Macho Man.
Oh yeah,
Macho Man, dig it. Oh yeah.
Snap into a Slim Jim.
Snap into a cup of coffee in the big time.
So with this rivalry, Frank here is going to take his trusty steed. He's going to stand in for Mr. Hogan.
All right.
And I'm going to take Mr. Macho Man Randy Savage.
All right. The losing side. All right.
And I didn't lose. I got Elizabeth. I didn't lose.
You lost her not too long after that, there, buddy.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Oh, okay. Different podcast.
We got to stay in the era there.
Oh,
we got to stay in the era.
Sorry.
So these two were great friends. It's
better rivals.
All
right. There's a tagline.
And no better tagline. I think you could talk for these two guys. Flair and not Flair, but Hogan and Savage, they connected on a common enemy, and they were teamed up, and they were
the mega powers.
The mega powers. So they were on the same page, but with most tag teams, it got very, very awkward there when Savage thought that old Hogan might be messing with his lady.
Well, from what I heard, he accused him of having lust in his eyes, brother. Lust, Elizabeth. Oh, yeah. Dig it. But yeah, I mean, the Mega Powers, great tag. At that point in time, you'd never seen a team get together, two singles get together and make that kind of team for that kind of run. I mean, they were a tag team for basically a year. I mean, that was, especially in WWF at the time, World Wrestling Federation, especially in that time, we didn't have long-term storytelling like that. You had, a couple matches here, they would, as some of the wrestlers say, around the horn, you'd get an angle to happen somewhere, and then they'd go around the horn, doing all the local shows and all that, and then you'd get a Saturday Night Live or something that would kind of blow it off. And that would be it. But a year, I mean, you didn't have, think from WrestleMania 1 to WrestleMania 2 and so on and so forth, you didn't have any storylines that carried on a year.
No.
I mean, the only one that played into it a little bit was Mr. T and Roddy Piper, but Mr. T wasn't full-time wrestlers, meaning he would pop in every now and again and drop Roddy's name, or Roddy might say a little shout to, but they weren't in a storyline because they didn't know they were going to get Mr. T for WrestleMania 2. So they didn't overbook that. They just kind of fell into a happy accident. But with Hogan and Macho Man, I mean, that was a pre-planned story that they executed at different times throughout an entire year. I mean, multiple pay-per-views, multiple Saturday nights main events, a couple drop-ins on Superstar. They drew that story out to perfection. And, as a kid, a young kid that had already been into wrestling, watching a storyline play out like that really took me from, hey, I just want to see a couple of matches, to I'm invested in these characters now. I'm starting to understand these people, and I want to follow their stories. That was a lot different for wrestling for me, having that kind of story like that. And again, WWF didn't have anything like that up to that point.
And the element of Miss Elizabeth there made it real.
Absolutely. I mean, I was 10 when this started, but even I could understand, because I had lust in my eyes for Miss Elizabeth. Oh, yeah. I mean, as a 10-year-old boy, yeah. But nonetheless, I could completely relate with, hey, my buddy over here has got a crush on the girl that I like. I don't like that. Forget that guy. Screw that guy.
Yeah.
That's my girlfriend. Hey, and by 10 years old, everybody had that interaction. So, I mean, as a 10-year-old kid, you could relate. God knows, as a teenager or anything like that watching, you could definitely relate. And, there's grown men out there that could relate as they were eerily looking at their neighbor's wife or something the wrong way and stuff. So, I mean, it was a relatable story. It was completely understandable. And it was great. I mean, it was just great storytelling for a rivalry. It was amazing.
Did the story equal the match?
So that's an interesting topic, right? Macho Man he had a classic. He had a wrestling classic at WrestleMania 3 with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Right.
WrestleMania 4, Macho Man wrestled 4 times. He had to wrestle a tournament to get to the championship. So by WrestleMania 5, Macho Man was a seasoned WrestleMania performer. I mean, Hogan had headlined all those WrestleManias, but Macho Man was a seasoned performer. I think Macho Man carried him to a good match. Watching him back today through the lens of 2023, and by far, it wasn't a 5-star by no means. Probably, let's say realistically, 2 stars on the match, 4 stars on the story.
Yeah.
So you'd say it's it's an average match. Yeah. It kind of is what it was on that, but the story, I mean, the rivalry wasn't the match. They only wrestled one time between when they started tagging and when they wrestled at WrestleMania 5. So, they'd only touched once. They had altercations and backstage arguments, things like that, but they only wrestled one time at that point. So at that point, you're not really looking at the match so much. You're invested in that story.
Yeah, so let's segue into the next era there, talking about stories, and possibly one of the best stories that was ever told in the NWA era was the story of Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair.
To beat a man, you gotta beat the man.
And that is one of the nuggets of pro wrestling that I grew up on. And I'm going to take Flair out of this rivalry, and my co-host here is going to take old Dusty.
Well, I'm going to take Dusty Rhodes, baby, because I'm Dusty Rhodes. And when Dusty Rhodes is in the house right now, it's Too Sweet.
Was he the originator of Too Sweet?
No, I don't even know if he said Too Sweet. He might have said So Sweet, but as far as sweet goes, I mean, Adrian Adonis was the sweetest wrestler that I knew growing up at the time. But that's a different terminology for a different era. But nonetheless, but that was Adrian Adonis's name. But I mean, Dusty Rhodes, when he said it, he meant it in a different way, baby. He didn't mean it in the way of of who he may have been attracted to sexually. Now, he did not mean it that way. Dusty Rhodes meant it as he was the baddest, he was the nicest wrestler in the ring. But I mean, just as far as the rivalry goes, Dusty and Ric Flair, leader of the Four Horsemen. So we talked about in previous episodes, but he spearheaded the charge against Dusty Rhodes, and I mean, you got Dusty Rhodes as the common man, the everyman, and then you got Nature Boy Ric Flair, the top guy, the rich guy. Basically, he's like a 1%er talking to a plumber. Essentially, it was that, to put it into more modern day terms. And I mean, you're always going to get conflict out of that. I mean, that story wrote itself. All you had to do is find the right two characters to put in the place, and they found the perfect two characters. One who called himself the common man, living the American dream, and one who lived that 1%er lifestyle and flaunted it, bragged about it, showed it off at every given moment.
Yeah, and with them two, I mean, it was to the point where it didn't matter what you saw in the ring. It's what you heard on the mic. Both of them were just, they were believable and they could relate the stories. And even if Flair wasn't trying to relate to the audience, he could spin you a tale that just basically told you, hey, I am more stylish than you. I am more extravagant than you. I live my life in a more lavish lifestyle than you.
To coin a phrase from a current wrestler, he's RF and he's better than you, and you know it. But that was the truth.
Yep.
Coming out of, I mean, that feud, like you were saying, you know, the microphone work that they had, that feud is where the Hard Times promo spawned from.
Yep.
I mean, and that's probably one of the most epic promo. I've heard Maria Menounos recite the Hard Times promo before. That's how epic that was. I mean, and Maria's a wrestling fan, yeah, but she ain't a wrestling fan like us. I mean, you know, she's a runway model. She's got a lot of stuff going on. But the fact that she knew a lot of those words out of that Hard Time promo lets you know that resounded with a lot of people.
By the way, Maria, just, you know, if you ever want to call into the podcast.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We're just putting that out there.
Our numbers are, matter of fact, we'll DM you the number right now. We'll DM you the website, whatever you need, or whatever you need. Absolutely.
So this rivalry, it spanned quite a few years, quite a few branches off of their storyline, breaking Dusty's leg at one point. Just amazing story arc. But telling you, man, Flair, just something about him. He had it, man.
Hey, those two guys, they lived the gimmick. I mean, hell, if Dusty was with us today, they'd still be living the gimmick.
Still would be, absolutely.
And I mean, they'd probably still be going after each other to this day. But but that's what makes it classic. The fact that it, like you said, it spanned forever. And those guys really lived into it. It's strange when you hear, you know, like Ric Flair or other people talk today and find out those guys were like friendly behind the scenes. What?
Yep. You're like, what? No way.
Looking back at it, I'm, you know, now that wrestling has pulled the curtain back about as far as they could possibly pull it.
Yeah.
You know, you start hearing these things, but I'm like, wait a minute. They lived near each other in Charlotte. They hung
right down the road from each other.
Their kids hung out growing up. What?
Yeah.
No, they hated each other. They were mortal enemies. If Dusty had saw Ric Flair in the street, he'd have ran him over with his car. That's what you were thinking with the way they were going at it. But, I mean, great to find out that the mutual respect that they had for each other in the business was there. Great, really great to find out, you know, that they were friends outside, that they really pushed each other to get to that next level. I think that's what it took, what made both of those guys achieve what they achieved, because they had that internal competitiveness between the two of them, kind of like how me and you have. Like when I say something profound on the show, and then you're like, "We got to cut the commercial." You know, it's kind of like that. It's just how it goes.
Tipping out of our funds, though. We couldn't get to the commercials.
Oh, sure, the commercials, yeah. But I know that's time for you to think. We know what's going on. We know what's going on.
You said something right there, though. You said next level, and let's talk about next level. Let's get into the Ruthless Aggression era. And, you know, Vince kind of started this era in his kind of challenge to the backstage, saying he wants this next generation to reach up and grab the brass
ring. Yeah.
Well, Vince was known for some other grabbing, but
Lord,
we won't go there. We'll stay away from that one.
Hey, for $3 million, Vince could grab me. Well, there's a second pop, guys. We're going to go ahead and take a drink on that.
2 in 1 show. All right, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. We're going to move on. But we're talking about the one that needed to reach up and grab the brass ring, and that was John Cena.
The champ is here.
Mr. Super Cena. And matter of fact, he was so super. In thinking about a rival for him, it's just the world.
yeah, John wrestled everybody. I mean, he had blood feuds with Edge and Randy Orton and Triple H and Shawn Michaels and Jesus Christ. Was there anybody he didn't wrestle out there?
But in this rivalry, I'm going to be taking Super Cena. Mr. Frank here is going to be taking the world. But Cena he was special, and I'm going to put a word out here that a lot of people may not like, but he was very Hogan-esque. I mean, he was the Hogan of that era of wrestling.
Well, yeah, he was the guy that they could put on the cereal boxes or the posters or things like that. Because, you know, we all know the graduating class that he came out of OVW with Batista and Brock Lesnar and Randy Orton, Shelton Benjamin. But think about all those names. None of those guys got that marketable face. Like, Brock Lesnar ain't marketable. You know what I mean? First of all, he ain't sociable. So it's hard to be marketable if you ain't sociable. That wasn't going to happen. Batista was older, you know, when he came out. Randy Orton, he kind of had a checkered past for one. And he also, he found his way into a lot of trouble back in the backstage of WWE before like Evolution came around. So, this Shelton Benjamin, he was always a great wrestler, but he really never had that on the mic personality that WWE is looking for to ascend to that, top tier level.
Right.
So that left John Cena. You had a lot of guys on the way out. You had the Hogan era was kind of issuing out. The Attitude era was issuing out. All those guys that were hanging off from those two eras were kind of fading. So you needed a face of the company. And I mean, John Cena fit that to a T. He was well-spoken when he needed to be, the stuff he did with Make-A-Wish. I mean, my goodness, he's done more Make-A-Wishes than anybody on the planet.
Anybody.
So, I mean, so he had to fight the world, but I mean, the world obviously brought a lot of competitors for him. It wasn't like the old days where it was like the villain machine that they were building for Hulk Hogan, where you had all the guys that he was going to run through. The world got a lot of victories over Cena. That's why Cena's a 16-time champ.
Right.
16-time champ means you lost 16 times. So,
but in thinking about though why we chose Cena versus the world, there wasn't a wrestler that he could not get in the ring with and have a great match.
No, I mean, he had a lot of programs with him too. Right. I mean, now granted he was in full time for 15 years. So I mean, he had a lot of, it's kind of like LeBron James in basketball, how they say, LeBron's the GOAT because he's got a lot of points and all. Well, hell, LeBron James has been in basketball for 20 years now. Of course he's got a lot of points. If you do anything for 20 years, you should have a lot of something. But nonetheless, Cena had, again, feuds with Edge, Randy Orton, Triple H. I mean, Batista, there isn't anybody that he didn't have.
He even got The Rock to come out of Hollywood.
He got The Rock to come out of Hollywood and do a 3-year feud with him. I mean, they did a 3-year program with The Rock. I mean, there isn't a name in wrestling that was active during Cena's era that he didn't wrestle and have a feud with. I mean, again, we're not talking about a one-off, and that's kind of why I'm not bringing up Kurt Angle, because we know he debuted against Kurt Angle, but they never really had a program. Yeah. Or at least not a memorable program, because Cena wasn't Cena when he was wrestling with Kurt Angle. By the time Cena had got to that level where he was really John Cena, him and Kurt were completely separated. They were on different brands. Kurt was actually on his way out, not too far away from that. So, that's why we're not mentioning guys like him. But I mean, all the other guys that we mentioned, he had programs with, months-long rivalries with these guys. And there just isn't a way to pick, the best one. There's not, it was the best against this guy. Because, I mean, all of them were just great. They were epic. He carried the company for at a minimum decade.
Yes, definitely the face of the company for a long time.
Yep.
So, so with Cena there, if you want to get a good representation of what we're talking about, if you play video games, get yourself into a copy of WWE 2K23.
Oh, yeah.
The showcase there is about Cena. It spans his career, talks about a lot of the rivalries that he had throughout the years. That was fun to play through.
Yeah, just to remember
some of it, just because Cena wasn't known for his antics as far as like Austin driving a beer truck out. Cena was known for basically roasting you on the mic and then whooping your ass in the ring.
Then being able to put out in the ring. So, I mean, that's what it was. And he became polarizing because of it. Just like anybody else, when you're on top for so long, inevitably people get tired of it. They just don't, me being a Tom Brady fan, I've heard from so many people, we're just sick of seeing him go to the Super Bowl. I don't want it. It's not that we'd hate him or like him or whatever. I'm just tired of seeing him. That we want other people to have a chance. It got like that in wrestling. Fans were just like, hey, we want other people in the main event spot. Well, to get in the main event spot, you got to knock the guy that's in there out.
Right.
And there just wasn't anybody that came along that was going to knock Cena out of that main event spot when he was at his peak.
True. So that was the Ruthless Aggression era. We're going to go into one more era, talk about the modern era. This would be what you see on the product that you're watching TV today. And for this one, we're going to shine the light on the ladies a little bit and talk about the rivalry that Charlotte Flair had with Becky Lynch. And I'm going to take Becky, and old Frank here's taking Charlotte.
Oh yeah, I can handle the Queen. I can handle the Queen now. She's a top tier player. I'm a top tier player. It all makes sense to me.
Yeah, but see, Becky's the man, so I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You took Flair earlier, so I have to take Becky.
There you go. Got to flip flop and fly on this one. So we're gonna do that here.
So this rivalry comes from actually their closeness of each other, as they were huge friends brought up through NXT, part of the Four Horsewomen. Of course, that was Charlotte, Becky, Sasha, and Bayley. So these two were kind of the cream of the crop out of the four, maybe? Would you say that? Would you go as far as saying that?
So when they hit the main roster, no. When they hit the main roster, I feel like Sasha and Charlotte were top tier because they were wrestling for the women's title, but they were able to wrestle each other. Becky, as you know, Bayley didn't come up when the other three came up. Becky had to go to SmackDown, where she was she was first SmackDown Women's Champ,
right?
But she didn't have the same, I guess, roster to work with over there that Sasha and Charlotte had. Sasha and Charlotte traded the title back and forth a few different times. Matter of fact, one of those changes came about 3 rows away from me in Charlotte once upon a time in the crowd. Where the title change had. So, I mean, stuff like that happened, and they had each other, to kind of work off of. One of our friends the other day said iron sharpens iron. So they had each other to sharpen their skills on, with each other. Unfortunately, Becky didn't get that same idea because she didn't have, the call-ups that were coming from NXT hadn't called up yet. We didn't have the Alexas and the Baileys and the Liv Morgans and the other characters that were in NXT at the time. They hadn't been called up yet. So Becky was kind of left on an island of her own.
Becky turned that turn, though, whenever we got Survivor Series.
Yeah.
She was the captain, and then...
Well, so after Nia Jax broke her nose and busted her up, they, had her bloody and all that, but, she fought through it, and then she stood up in the crowd. She was talking her trash, blood pouring down her face. Made her. I mean, made
her that night.
Yep. And so, kudos to Nia out there. I just saw Nia Jax lost like 50 pounds the other day. Looks great. Kudos. I ain't mad at that. But kudos to her. But I mean, through a happy accident, she made Becky Lynch that night. And Becky transformed. She changed from, happy last kicker and all that other stuff to being the man. And I mean, once she graduated to that, she had essentially ascended to Charlotte's level at that time, because by that point, Charlotte was the top tiers.
And that's where the rivalry really got good between the two, because they were fighting for that top spot.
Yeah.
There was one alpha, and it was either going to be Charlotte or it was going to be Becky. But then a third alpha entered the mix and wound up main eventing WrestleMania for the first time for a women's match ever.
Well, let's be honest. Had that third alpha not got in there, they probably would have made the main event. Because, I mean,
people might argue that, but I would actually agree with you.
At that point in time, I would just say that simply because the third alpha was Ronda Rousey.
Right. Big name value.
Yeah, so, and we had already seen up to that point. We saw WrestleMania 32. We saw Becky, Charlotte, and Sasha. They did a triple threat for the women's title at the time. That was mid-card. It was a great match, but it was mid-card. But those girls were really young, really fresh into the business at that time. So they weren't ready to be on that next level at main event level anyway. But nonetheless, without the name value of Ronda Rousey at that particular time, I don't think the women would have main evented there. But luckily Ronda was there. They were able to main event because they all got to showcase their talents. And Becky got made that night, by winning both championships, even though the pin was a little controversial. But, I mean, unfortunately for Charlotte, as I'm taking the Charlotte side, she was kind of just thrust into that match at the last minute because, I don't think there was a lot of confidence that a Becky-Ronda one-on-one match would be a main event. So they thrust Charlotte in. Charlotte got her helicopter entrance, fabulous entrance. But the rivalry at that point was really Becky and Ronda. Charlotte was just, in the match, But I mean, she needed to be because her work rate carried the match. So.
Yeah, and this is one of the things though about this rivalry that we're talking about now. Vince Austin, obviously, we all know the admiration that the both had for each other. Even though there was some rocky times where Austin took his ball and went home. But at the end of the day, they both wound up respecting one another. Hogan Savage.
Same thing. They were real good friends in there, and we know they had a lot of rocky times, and throughout their relationship.
Yeah. Dusty and Flair.
Yeah, I mean it's a trend in this. It's great when you're doing great business, right? Yeah. But inevitably in any rivalry, somebody wants to come out ahead.
Yeah,
it's hard to stay equals when you're at the top of your game. Two men don't rest at the top of a mountain peak. It's just not possible. There's only room for one.
Yeah.
And somebody's going to have to take that step down, but nobody's going to willingly do it.
And then with Cena versus the World, everybody held Cena in high respects. Always talks good about Cena.
Yeah, but even think about when him and The Rock. We said that was a good. That ended well. But
didn't start well.
That started on a way that they didn't know if they were going to be able to make it to do business, because they started. It wasn't even Rocky. They started in the hellgates of fire.
Yeah,
they disliked each other when they started that angle.
And that's where Charlotte and Becky is now.
Hopefully they can end the way that Rock and Cena ended somewhere down the road. When they both get older, when they both walk away from the business, I have no doubt that they can be good friends. Great friends at that point in time. Then, but right now, I mean,
that's a rivalry that's real life.
Yeah, because they're both at the top of the game.
The mountain.
They both want to be now with what they've all got going on. Becky obviously having her child, getting married, she was able to step away from the business a little bit. She came back. Then Charlotte did kind of the same thing. She got married. She stepped away from the business for a little bit. So looking at it now, they may have different perspectives on it now, but there hadn't been anything that said that they've reconciled by no means. So there's nothing showing that they're back on friendly terms.
No, the last you've heard about it was on the Stone Cold show that they did on the network. Where they were talking about, they broke down some of Becky's stuff, and then he had Charlotte on there. And then the question came up about the title switch, the infamous title switch. And, one has one story, one has another story. What really happened, we may not know.
I think the truth lies in the middle
somewhere
of
in the middle of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, those two ladies are actual rivals right now. They do not like each other.
No, and it's unfortunate because, when you Charlotte, A&E did a biography on Charlotte recently, and they kind of covered their friendship. They broke into the business together. They helped each other adjust with both of them. Becky was coming over from Ireland. Charlotte was, kind of in an awkward stage in her life, kind of with what had happened, obviously being Ric Flair's kid. People are going to look at her a different way, like, oh, nepotism, blah, blah, blah. So, they were able to lean on each other a lot to help each other get through those early days. So it's unfortunate to hear that they're not friends now, but it's completely understandable. Anybody that has a competitive bone in their body completely understands you can be as happy as you can possibly be for someone else's success. But when you're striving for that exact same position and somebody else gets it over you, you look at them a different way, to some level. Like I said, you're happy for them, wonderful, this is all great, but somewhere in the back of your mind or in the bottom of your heart, you're just like, man, why not me?
Why isn't it me?
And that why not me is always going to turn into resentment to the person that it is. It may not be intentional. You may not even ever know it, but somewhere down the road, you realize, damn, I resent that person for getting what I feel like I should have. And I feel like that's where those two women are right now, with their age, the age they are, they're still young. They've been in wrestling forever. So, it's not like they're out in the world a lot. They're consumed by wrestling. So it's very important to them. So, when somebody's in that spot that you really want to be in, you're going to look at them sideways a little bit like, hey, why not me? Unfortunately, that's where they are now. But yeah, like I said earlier, I feel like, give it 10 years or so when they're able to walk away from the business, I feel like they'll look back at it and say, oh, damn, we wasted all these years of, good friendship on some silly stuff. But it ain't silly to you when you're in the moment. Nothing is silly when you're in the midst of it. And they're just in the midst of it right now.
And talking about resentment, if you want to come at us, talk about your rival that we didn't mention, Hey, we ain't scared. Hit us up on our social media platforms.
Definitely not now.
Let's see what you got to talk about.
Yeah, anybody who thinks that they're a rival of mine, anybody that might be listening that might think that they took titles from me or they carry my belt now because they beat me for it or anything. If you're listening to something like that and you think you could be my rival, you're not my rival. You'll never be my rival. I'm the belt collector. I carry them all. I have them all. They will always be with me. They always reside with the champ. The cream always rises to the top. So I don't have rivals. I have people that admire me and just don't want to say it. But what do they say? Imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So I have that. I have those who admire me, and I appreciate that admiration. But I don't have rivals.
Yeah, and as your tag team partner here, sir, I'll be in your corner.
There we go. There we go.
I don't know if I'm gonna throw any blows or anything, but I'll be in your corner.
So yeah, I'm also not throwing any blows now. I'm just putting that out there right now.
I'm gonna be that chicken shit heel.
There you go. So yeah, me too. So so yeah. So anybody out there who may know who I'm referring to, I'm not calling anyone out. So.
All in good fun. But yeah, hit us up on our social media platforms. Let us know your thoughts. All in good fun. At the end of the day, we would love to hear your comments. So definitely reach out. We thank you for listening to today's episode. And with that, everybody, we bid you adieu.
Peace.
Today's podcast was produced by SBP. You can find our podcast on all major podcast platforms. Also connect with us on our social media accounts. Search for The Bookers Alliance on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.